Hello, and welcome back to this T-Level Tactics video for the T-Level Digital Support Services course. We're on to our fourth topic in Root Core 1 business context, which is influential factors. Let's take a look at what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to identify some factors that can influence businesses in different ways. Then we're going to analyse how these factors impact the operation of businesses, before finally making some recommendations for how a business can mitigate the negative impacts on them. As always, just a short disclaimer before we start. These videos are not endorsed or sponsored by any education institution or qualification awarding body. And T-Level Tactics videos should not be used as a replacement to any classroom learning you might be receiving. We think that the discussion and practical activities with your peers and lecturer will help to expand your thinking and comprehension. Instead, these materials are best used as preparation material or revision to reinforce any learning. And finally, if you're studying the T-Level Digital Business Services course, this content works for you too. However, it is going to be more contextualized towards IT support roles. Okay, let's get started then. So, we've already looked at how stakeholders can influence organizations, but there's more to it than just that. What about the wider world? Businesses and organizations have to constantly adapt to external changes and pressures. We're going to focus on 6 of them for this course: political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental. Now, although we've only just looked at the kinds of influences we're going to focus on, we have got a task already for those of you signed up to the Patreon. So head on to the Patreon page, download the task sheet, and it's just going to be a short research task on a business, just to have a look at some of those influences and how you think it might affect it. Try not to use the internet to help you. It's all about what you're currently thinking and your best guesses. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just all on your opinion. It's a really quick one. Don't spend any longer than 10 minutes on it, and come back to this video and we'll move on to the second part. Pause here. Have a go at the task, no more than 10 minutes. Come back when you're ready. Okay, let's take a look at some of these factors in a little bit more detail. We'll start with political. So in terms of political influences, it could be such as where the business is located globally. There could be different laws, regulations, legislation, things to do with tax, for instance, that will have an impact on the business. There could be different import and export opportunities. Think about the impact of the UK leaving the European Union, and different businesses that import and export to the European Union. Things have taken a bit longer now that the UK is out of the European Union, and there may be some tariffs involved as well. Now, tariffs are essentially an additional tax on goods entering a country. So if we're to send something from the United Kingdom to elsewhere, that country may say, well, hey, this widget, we've got a tariff on it because, well, we'd prefer people to use our own widgets and not the ones from the United Kingdom. So if you want to import from the United Kingdom, you've got to pay a little bit more money to do so. And that's exactly what it's designed to do. These high tariffs can dissuade businesses from importing goods from elsewhere. We've also got to think of intellectual property ownership, which is essentially if you've created something for a business, that business will own that idea and, well, needs to defend its ideas to stop other businesses copying it. There'll be things like tax policies as well. So based on the country, there are different tax rates depending on where you are, and it could be, for instance, 19 to 25% of your profits in the United Kingdom. There'll also be employment laws, things like minimum wage, working hours, how old you need to be before you can be employed by a business, which can vary from country to country as well. And there'll be unions to think of as well. A union being a group of workers who come together in order to bargain against their employer for things like wages and working conditions. Second influence we're going to look at is economic. And we've already mentioned wages and minimum wage, and this can be different across the world. In the United Kingdom, the minimum wage keeps going up every year, but in other places it doesn't, and workers often have to be supplemented with other things. We need to think about inflation Inflation being the rate at which costs increase year on year. It's why groceries and supermarkets get more expensive as time goes on. There'll be interest rates as well. This is something that in the UK the Bank of England sets. And an interest rate is how much it costs to borrow money from somebody, but also how much you can earn on that money if you save it with a bank. We'll also have to think about disposable income. And disposable income is for an individual how much they have after their living expenses. So wages, for instance, will have a big impact on disposable income. The higher the wages and the lower the cost of life's essentials, there'll be more disposable income for that person to spend on other things in the economy. And also consumer trends. What are people buying and what aren't they buying now? For instance, at this point in time, there is what's being called a cost of living crisis. So people are spending less money on things like going out to bars and restaurants and recreational leisure activities, and they're having to spend more on things like gas, electricity, and groceries. Our third factor is social. This is things like current events, social issues, and movements. So two things at the moment. There is the war in Ukraine that is going on. There is also the conflict between Israel and Palestine. Big movements at the moment are LGBT, and all of these can have an impact on how a business operates. They may want to be careful about what they say about certain movements and current events, and they may wish to side with a particular element of this. There's also social mobility. This is to do with social class and status, and is often determined by the level of income and job role of an individual. High levels of vertical social mobility indicate people's ability to enter into higher grade job roles with higher wages and the ability to improve their standard of living. Whereas low levels of social mobility may lead to horizontal mobility, with people only being able to move into similarly skilled roles. Economic decline may lead to downward mobility, where higher paying roles are in short supply or being phased out, which means that people end up earning less and less. We may also need to factor in things like economic growth or recession, and this is based on a national scale, and it's essentially how much that country is producing and how much money is being created and being spent. A recession being that people are spending less and that productivity is coming down. Our fourth factor is technological. Things like how a business is adapting to emerging technologies. Things like artificial intelligence. Is a business developing it, or are they incorporating it into their business? How are they staying ahead of the game? We've seen in recent years lots and lots of stuff to do with artificial reality and augmented reality. IKEA, for example, have got an app that you can download on your phone, and you can preview a piece of furniture from that store in your room. That's a great example of some augmented reality being incorporated by a business. Data analytics is also becoming big, where we can get lots and lots of data from our users, and we can perform various things on it to analyse, well, how are they spending their money? What are they likely to spend their money on in future? How can we incorporate that to increase our profit? And also an awareness of renewable energies as well, with green technology being quite a big thing at the moment. Let's move on to the legal influences. We've mentioned this is things like laws and legislation. We know that GDPR back in 2016 had a big effect on businesses and how they need to handle stored data, who can access it, and how the customer can access it as well. There'll be things about corporate law too. For example, the Companies Act of 2006, which ensures corporate and accountability and responsibility, and also dictates business structure and roles. There's a little bit in there that links in with one of our earlier lessons where we looked at those different types of private businesses. There's consumer law too, like the Consumer Rights Act of 2015, which basically says what the consumer's rights are when purchasing a product or service from a business. There's health and safety, which very much affects our employees and our work environment. The Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 is there to prevent harm or injury in the workplace. What does that mean we need to do in order to make sure we have a safe workplace? Do we need to spend more money on certain things, for instance? With environmental, we've got things like the Environment Act 2021 to consider. Things like e-waste and WEEE, which is the Waste, Electrical and Electronic Equipment Regulations of 2013. That's a little piece of regulation that basically says if you buy an electronic product from a business, they have to give you the opportunity to give them your old product for them to dispose of safely. Businesses are aware of their carbon footprint now, which is greenhouse gases created from the operation of the business, and also from other organisations that supply and work with that business as well. Environmental is our last influence that we're considering. Okay, now if you're on the Patreon, this is about time for your second task. And this is focusing on if you were to have your own business, how might some of these factors affect you? So if you are a Patreon member, head back to the task sheet and have a go at that second task. You only need to spend about 20 minutes on it. Just have a think through some of those factors, make some notes, and come back when you're ready. Okay, let's make some recommendations. I've got a bit of a case study for us to look at. It is completely fictional and not based on any real or existing business, but it is a scenario that will give us an opportunity to make some recommendations. Let's have a look. Multicore Retail are an established chain of stores. They sell a variety of products from electronics to clothing, and they have a loyal customer base who have shopped at their brick and mortar stores. But they haven't yet implemented an e-commerce solution. To say they're a bit behind the times is an understatement. So Multicore Retail have hired you as a consultant to find solutions to 3 questions. How can Multicore Retail leverage technological advancements to enhance its competitive advantage? What strategies can Multicore Retail implement to meet changing customer expectations in the digital age? And how might data analytics help Multicore Retail make informed business decisions and drive growth in a competitive market? Now, it's entirely up to you how you approach this. You can do it based on your current knowledge, or you could use your research skills to scour the internet for some answers. Make sure you write them down, and if you wanted to, you could discuss them with someone else afterwards. If you're on the Patreon, then there is a template available on the task sheet for you. There is also available on Patreon some suggestions and example answers, but I recommend you leave these until after you've finished. Give yourself a challenge first. I think this is going to take about 30 to 45 minutes to find reasonable research and answers to all 3 of those questions, and you may just need to rewind the video a little bit if you're not a member of Patreon to take another look at those. Spend 30 to 45 minutes, then come back and we'll just finish things up with an exam question. Okay, so over this video, we've identified some factors that can influence businesses. We've analysed how these factors can impact the operation of different businesses and organisations, and we've just made some recommendations for how a business could mitigate the negative impacts. Let's have a go at an exam question before we finish up. Here it is. Discuss the legal factors that can influence a business and its stakeholders. There are 6 marks here, and the key word in this question is discuss. You need to be making a few points with some different points of view there. That brings us to the end. In the next video, we're going to be looking at some digital value. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can see when the latest videos come out. And if you haven't joined the Patreon yet, do take a look, as you've got those task sheets and lots of other resources available there as well. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.